Well, it's that time again, that time when we belly up to the virtual bar and discuss the world's issues from a biblical perspective.
Yeah, that. Shoot.
Did you get that?
Got
That
a
was,
case of Bidenism.
Yeah, that was... I've caught Bidenosis.
Biden pox.
We're your hosts, Greg, Ken, and Chris, and this is Three Pastors Walk Into a Bar. So, Psalms 144, 1 through 2. Blessed be the Lord, my rock, who trains my hands for war and my fingers for battle. He is my steadfast love and my fortress, my stronghold and my deliverer, my shield, and he in whom I take refuge, who subdues people under me. That's a powerful verse.
Mm-hmm,
Why did you select that verse, Ken?
I selected that verse because it's the same Lord who told us, turn the other cheek, put down your sword. Those who live by the sword die by the sword. Also trains our hands for war.
Yeah, it's a strange dichotomy, isn't it?
Yes.
I think it's a struggle for a lot of Christians, particularly in the kind of place that we live in, where we're very big proponents of our Second Amendment rights. Yeah, it's a tough one. Well, we are honored also to be joined today by Sheriff's Deputy Nick Franssen. Nick, how you doing, bud?
I'm doing well.
Man, we really appreciate you being with us today and taking the time to sit down with us, and we appreciate what you guys are doing. We just appreciate you guys in total. We had a deputy out here, and he was doing what deputies do. They do paperwork most of the time. You know, he was on the parking lot
looking
doing
for
his
a quiet
paperwork.
place.
I always thought, I would, watching Cops growing up, I thought that's what it was going to be like. And I think that I actually have a pretty good lawsuit against them, because you watch
false advertising.
Yeah, you watch a 30-minute segment of Cops, and a few years into the job, you realize that 30 minutes of fun was about 4 hours of paperwork.
Right.
Not including the 4 days of your life you're not going to get back due to processing evidence in court and all the other stuff. So,
let's not forget the perusing through the manual on how to write the reports.
Well,
so you don't have a Men in
fake it
Black
till you make it.
Men in Black routine where somebody just automatically does all that for you?
These are tough economic times. We can't afford that.
For sure. So, Nick, tell us a little bit about yourself, your career with the Sheriff's Department.
Well, I always love the opportunity to tell people how awesome I am.
Right?
I've been blessed. I started as just a kid with the Kootenai County Sheriff's Office in the patrol division. I've been there. This is year 16 for me. In that time, I've been a number of things. I've been a Hayden deputy, which is a contract city. I've been a field training officer. I've been a property crimes detective. I've been on our mobile field force going to riots and those types of things. But I've been real blessed to be able to tailor my career mostly towards instructing. So I teach a myriad of things, and I teach in a myriad of areas. I teach at the academy. Basically, I can teach anything at the police academy except fighting and driving. I'm probably the only cop you'll ever meet that doesn't like to drive fast. It's not my thing. And I'm getting too old and fat to fight. So I'm just mean now, and they don't like those tactics taught to 23-year-olds. But I've been blessed to be able to be a longtime firearms instructor. So I teach firearms in all the disciplines. Recently got my master's cert for use of force. So I can basically, me or like an attorney from the AG's office can teach use of force law to new police officers and continuing ed. And then I'm one of those that believes if you have the ability to take a life, you should have the ability to save one too. So I'm a combat medic instructor, which is like the military's TCCC. It's been a fabulous program. We started back in 14 and saved almost 100 people's lives with that stuff.
What is that TCCC? What is that?
So the military model is on how to teach basically the lowest level troop in the field how to perform life-saving functions that stop preventable combat deaths.
Yeah.
We're talking about real simple equipment to treat trauma more than anything. I mean, I teach CPR and basic first aid, but this is the stuff that we deal with that people don't need to die, but commonly do. Stuff like automobile accidents, chainsaw accidents, tractors rolling over, backcountry stuff. We're teaching guys how to use tourniquets, chest seals, pressure dressings, pack wounds, nasal, pharyngeal airways.
Like a blowout kit, basically.
That's it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's been a hugely successful program in our community.
Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah. That's a good philosophy. If you're going to go out there and you're going to carry and you're going to be committed to the possibility of taking a life, and you should be able to save a life as well. It's not a bad philosophy, really.
Well, people, everybody sees that romance with the firearm, and I believe everybody has the right and should take on the responsibility to defend yourself and your family. But the gun's one tool. And, we talk about our belts as being tool belts. The gun's only one tool in that entire belt. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that does a whole bunch of other things. And quite honestly, I've never been in a shooting. I've been very fortunate. I've been at several. I've been involved in the investigations and the aftermaths of them. But I have been able to save a few lives with some tourniquets and some other stuff that I carry on my belt. So I believe wholeheartedly in that stuff too.
That's a big deal.
Yeah.
It's a big deal. It's much easier on your psychology to save a life as opposed to taking one, for sure.
Very much so.
Yeah, for sure. So you've done a lot of training. You've done talks on community preparedness. You have prepared this list of slides for your training that you are partaking, or that you're giving out, or that you're training. Is that specifically that like slide sheet that you gave us? Is that specifically for the sheriff's department, or are you teaching that to civilians as well?
So the slideshow that you're referring to is the newest curriculum. The sheriff's office is going to be providing 5 classes around the community during the month of August. We're going to do it before school starts. And it's not so much a class as it is a discussion, but we're going to be doing some outreach in some commonly forgotten about places in the county, one of them being Athol. And we're going to, it's going to be co-sponsored by the Kootenai County Sheriff's Office Employee Association. So we'll have beverages and snacks and food.
Nice.
Trying to get community members to come out to hear what we have to say, to talk about some of the real facts and the realities of these active threat events, or active shooter events as they're more commonly called, and how to prepare yourself and your family for them. What are some warning signs? What are some things that the public can do? And to really reassure the public that we train on this and we're prepared for this.
Do you have a date at this point?
We're actually working all those out right now.
Okay.
I just actually received some emails today from the District 1 deputy who's responsible for Athol, Bayview, and Spirit Lake areas.
Okay.
He's working with the city. We'll be doing it at the Athol Community Center because it's the biggest show in town for being able to get people there. We're going to be doing one down at the Micah Grange, so down on south of the river on the west side. We'll be doing one at Kootenai High School, so south on the east side of the county. One at the Office of Emergency Management in Hayden, and then one probably at Garwood Elementary right now.
And how will that be communicated to the
it'll be
community?
By press release. It'll be by Facebook.
Okay, it's going to be well known.
Yep, we're going to put it out. We really want. The one thing that I will say is that's not, kids aren't prohibited, but it's really not meant for bringing your whole family to. This is the information. The other thing I want to reiterate, though, is it's not just about schools. And the slideshow that I provided you that you were alluding to, that's talking about all different types of venues. And one thing that you find is schools actually are not the most common where we suffer these kind of tragedies.
Yeah. We were talking about the statistics that you give on there. So, like, what are, like, kind of like a rough idea of where these things take place? Because I know you have schools, and then you have businesses, and you have churches, and like which ones are actually higher, and why is it that we only hear about school shootings?
Well, we can talk about some realities there. There's nothing more important in the world to us than our children. So it's going to be sensationalized.
Yeah.
The other thing is quite honestly, they can weaponize it based on the political whim.
Yeah.
And that's sad, but it's true. Schools are an easy target, mostly because of the sheer number of people in a small area, and then the perception that they can't defend themselves. We've worked really hard to change that within our own community, but the most common place is actually a business, and it's middle of the day, lunch hour type stuff. That's the most common event or location for one of these events to take place.
Yes.
And why don't we hear about that more often?
Well, we do. I just don't think that you get the huge pull that you gain from saying all of these school children were injured, or
the media traction is not as
the media
good.
traction. But there's also, it pulls at the heartstrings. When you look at the events, though, churches are actually relatively low. Schools are not a super common target. It does happen, but it's not super common. But depending on the generation, if you will, or the years, the federal government is who tracks these numbers, and they will change the definition once in a while of what that is. So one thing that we see is now, I believe the newest reporting is, 3 or more victims at any one event. Well, those happen actually pretty regularly, but you don't hear that 3 people were shot in an active shooter attack in Chicago 3 times last night.
Right.
You're not going to get
too
the traction. They're not going to sensationalize it. No different than a kid brings a gun to a school and some people get hurt. It's a huge tragedy, but they're not sensationalizing when somebody drives through a bunch of kids during a parade.
Yeah. Does the federal government track all of those shootings as equal, or do they separate them out? I mean, as far as the federal or as the national averages go?
If you're trying to get me to explain how the federal government conducts business, I'm not your guy.
We don't
Good
have
answer.
the time either.
Good answer.
So those business attacks, are those primarily in the course of a robbery, or
That's an interesting
disgruntled
point.
employees going postal?
It's going to be a little of all of that. And that's actually why it's so difficult. The most common reason that I can find for those business type attacks is usually the upset spouse, lover, whatever it is that led to them going to the place of work and hurting people.
Interesting.
And is that
crime of passion
primarily why the numbers are low? It's like they're targeting 1 or 2 people.
Yeah, so the numbers are going to be typically they're going to be substantially lower. It is that crime of passion. There might be 2, 3 victims, but there's not going to be a huge count of victims in those cases, but they would still meet the criteria.
Sure.
Yeah. Is there a correlation between the victim numbers and the weapon capacity? Because we hear a lot about that these days, about limiting weapon capacities, and that's one thing that we can do to kind of curb the devastation of some of these school shootings. Is there a correlation between those things that you guys have seen, or is that a non-issue?
Well, I guess I can answer it 2 ways. One is handguns are still more commonly used than any other weapon source for those types of events. So you're going to have limited capacity in a handgun anyways. It's got to be hand portable, if you will. As far as were high capacity magazines used or not used, I don't know that we can get that far into the weeds. I don't know that those are tracked that substantially. But I think that a real key point there is, in America, we worry about firearms and we worry about magazine capacities. The rest of the world has as many attacks as we do, but they're with knives or with bombs or with vehicles because guns are harder to come by.
Mm-hmm.
Evil will always find a way if allowed.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, in this country, firearms are readily available. And that typically is the weapon of choice. That's changing a little bit. We're starting to see vehicles and knives used in mass attacks far more frequently than we ever have in our history. But you look at countries like Switzerland, where every household that has a military-age male is mandated to have a military firearm, a full auto, usually a SIG 550 or 551.
And they've been trained.
And they've been trained, and it's not that they don't have these events, but they're at a statistically lower number than pretty much anywhere else.
Yeah. I actually think they ranked higher than us based on per capita population, but I think it's probably an unfair kind of representation because their population is so much lower than ours. It's like comparing us to Canada or something.
Well, yeah, but you know what? If I've learned anything about teaching these classes and studying this stuff, you can make the numbers move
Do whatever
however
you want.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
63% of statistics are made up on the spot.
Did you just make that up?
I did.
Nice.
Well, 70% of the time it works every time.
Yeah.
That's true. That's
Almost.
all of those things are statistically true. Good job, guys.
We digress. Okay.
Way to go. Way to go. Now, one thing that I saw in here as I'm reading through what we're talking about here today, only 3% of victims return fire.
Well, that is a staggering statistic, but there's a couple things to think about there.
Okay.
One, we live in a gun culture. I would say historically as a country, we have a gun culture.
Yeah.
And definitely within our little slice of heaven here in North Idaho, we have one of the highest per capita gun ownership rates in the country. It's not the highest. Alaska and Wyoming still beat us.
Oh, we got to step them.
I know.
Step
Those
it
are
up.
rookie numbers.
What in the world?
I'm going out to
Third,
get
really?
another one.
Yeah. Well, if you already own guns, you don't actually add to the statistics.
Oh.
Yeah, we
Come
need
on,
more
Greg.
households too.
Okay. Dang.
Yeah.
But keep in mind where most of these events take place. Now, we have seen, even within our own community, tragedies occur in places that people do have firearms. But most of these are occurring in places that have some of the most anti-gun laws in the country, and they're still happening. It's not a flaw of law, it's a flaw of man.
Right. And that 3% you would say probably is mainly due to the fact that there just were not many people armed.
Well, I think it's going to be a combination of they weren't armed. Honestly, bad people don't want to go to places where people can defend themselves.
Yeah.
They want easy target. Second, even if there was a gun in there, that doesn't mean that people were prepared to use it.
Yeah.
Based on training, based on experience, knowledge. And then third, it could even be there was a gun in the fight on the good side, but they were in a role where they weren't able to use said firearm.
Hurting children or taking care of kids or whatever.
At the end of the day, you have to make a decision of what your role's going to be. And if my role is to guard a nursery, I'm going to keep those kids safe as a citizen.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go looking for a gunfight.
Yeah. It was amazing to me after the Uvalde shooting, the number of people that were just kind of outraged about the whole situation. On the left, it was like, don't you dare talk about mental health. It's all about we need to ban guns. And then on the right, they're just like, we need to arm everyone. It's like when you start talking about, we need to arm all of our teachers, it's like, well, why are we talking about that? Because, that's not their job description. They didn't get into teaching so that they could protect your kids with a firearm. It's not fair to ask them to do that. I guess you could pay them to do that if you wanted to pay them to be security guards plus teachers.
We're looking for a mechanical solution to a heart problem.
Exactly.
And if we arm all teachers, then there won't be any problems. Well, that's not true either.
No, not true at all.
The other part of that is, and you brought up a great point. I speak to this in my classes. I'm one of the rare ones because I still go into classrooms and teach kids, and I've been a Cub Scout leader and teach a myriad of sources. But if you picture whatever you have is that stereotypical jaded, salty old cop in your mind. That's not who you want to make little Billy feel special and take away his boo-boo and give him a great side hug. Yeah. No different than, the 62-year-old kindergarten teacher who's been teaching 28 years, who knows how to make every kid feel like the most important kid in the whole world, probably isn't the most intimidating when ISIS decides to try to take over a school.
Right.
They're different roles.
Yeah.
Both valuable in our society. Both should be celebrated. But there's not a lot of people who can fill both roles.
Yeah, it's such a rarity to have that complete package. I mean, and that's not even a complete package. That's like 2 packages all together. I mean, it's like, who's like that?
Are you an advocate of arming those teachers that are capable of defending themselves and defending these children?
So I think it's a discussion that should be had. I don't think that we should be necessarily opposed to it. However, there's a lot of realities that go along with that are commonly forgotten about. Who's going to teach the teachers? Well, that's pretty easy. It usually goes, hey, we'll have the cops teach the teachers. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
And that's viable. But
because you guys have all the time in the world.
Well, sure.
Yeah.
But what are we going to teach the teachers? If we have to teach them how to use said firearm, and then Idaho law and use of force, well, there's probably a couple of 2-3 weeks of training a year they're going to have to get. And that's not so bad. Not that I want to steal their summers from them, but okay, we could do that. But then we also have to teach them weapons retention, because they should know how to maintain that firearm, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And keep it from ending up in the wrong hands. And then we're going to have to teach that. That's about a 40-hour class. And then we're going to have to change the way that we do school, because there's going to be a firearm around. We can't have unauthorized people having access. How does that look?
Yeah, you're creating new policies and procedures. You're
a
really
whole bunch, plus continuing ed, because I think we do the public a disservice by saying, hey, if you can show you had any kind of firearms training, we'll give you a concealed weapons permit. I watch guys come in with a DD-214 from 1956 and get a concealed weapons permit.
Yeah.
That doesn't teach them anything. Even with the Idaho Enhanced, we make them shoot for that. Yeah. But they renew 5 years later and they haven't received a case law update. They also haven't shot again. Most people aren't training at that level. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing more important than our kids. We have to hold them to a higher responsibility. What's that look like? I don't have all those answers, but I know that it's on the table for me individually, but there's a lot of stuff that's got to go around with that people just commonly forget about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's a tough discussion, because it's like everybody wants the kids to be safe, and everybody I think wants the same thing. That's what's tough about it, but nobody agrees on how to get there. And putting the firearms in the schools, even though that might be a solution, it's like nobody's really thinking about, what do the teachers want? Do the teachers even want that, or should they want that? It's like, I kind of want my teachers to be focused like you said, it's 2 different roles, I want the guy who's good at making every kid feel amazing and is going to help them to succeed and to grow and to mature in life and become a decent citizen of the United States of America. That I'm not, I would rather have that guy than the guy who's, fully tactically trained, tactical guy that's like, got all the bangs and whistles and all that kind of stuff. Both of those things are great. They just don't belong in the same place a lot of times.
Well, this kind of touches on the SRO issue, right? Are the people who are calling for arming teachers in school districts that don't have SROs, and how effective are SROs?
The resource officers?
Yeah.
The school resource officers are truly one of the biggest deterrents that we're going to have, but they're also one of the biggest assets that school's going to have, because their job is so much more than being armed security for kids. They are doing the mentoring and the leadership and development of these kids and youth. They also are doing investigations to make sure that no kid falls through the cracks and is being abused or not showing up to school. They make sure that those kids are safe and healthy at home and in the school.
Yeah, but gosh, Nick, that's such a massive job to ask that guy to do, isn't it?
It is, but
That's what they're hired for.
that's what they want to do.
Yeah.
Truly, if I wasn't in the role that I'm in now at the sheriff's office doing community outreach, that was probably going to be my career path. I absolutely love it.
Mm-hmm.
Does it take a special cop to be able to do that job? 100%.
Yeah.
And I want littles. I don't think I would be a good fit in a high school.
A high school resource officer.
But there are people out there, men and women, who are just absolutely fabulous at that job. And that is a calling within a calling.
Yeah.
It's a celebrated position.
Our local elementary school here has a resource officer that the kids love.
Absolutely.
You know, he walks down the hall and, hi, officer, hi, Mr. So-and-so. And when I see that, when I'm over there, it's very uplifting.
Oh, very much
know
so.
that he is well liked, not only by the kids, but the staff as well.
Sure.
And he's integrated into that. He's not this guy walking around with any type of authority.
Yeah, but
he's
what
part of the system.
My concern with that is, and I think it's great. I love these guys, but yeah, you know, you're giving them the task of being the mentor, trainee kind of leadership role of a school, plus protect it, plus I mean, it's just like, how would you be able to coordinate, like say for our church, for instance, how could our church coordinate with him to give him resources that he needs to accomplish his goal? And I keep saying his, it could be his or her, I mean, it's like their job, like how could we integrate in with them to help them do their job without stepping on their feet?
Well, there's a time and a place for both. A lot of stuff that occurs in the schools is handled by the schools. Mm-hmm. And even stuff on the outside that would be considered a crime, the schools deal with, and that's okay. They have their own accountability. They have their own punishment. They have their own plans for follow-up. But at some point, some things become criminal in nature, and school resource officers jump in for that. They're part of the implementation of the school policies, but also state law. As far as integrating in with a school resource officer, that's a little tougher from the aspect of being a church doing that. But integrating with local law enforcement with a response to anything, giving us the opportunity to come in and talk to you and explain what we're doing, why we do what we do, and, heeding advice from security measures that can be taken, getting us plans like blueprints of the building so we know, hey, this is what it looks like if we are responding, working on preparing your parishioners for if there is an event, this is what it looks like, coming up with a safety plan, a reunification plan. Those types of things they make my job so much easier. It's the stuff on the front side where there was no planning that it creates a mess for us.
Is that part of what this training is all about, to get into places like businesses and churches and kind of give them kind of the to-do list of what we need to do to integrate with law enforcement to be the best benefit for law enforcement?
That's only part of it, and probably the smaller part of it. The bigger part of it is how to prepare your people, your group, whatever that is. I teach this curriculum to civic groups. I teach it to businesses. I teach it to churches. When we go in and we're able to get some good information and a basis of knowledge on the front side, God forbid there ever is an event, but if there is, we are so much more successful. They say, kind of a military cliche is, you don't learn any new skills during a gunfight. Well, this is case in point. If we can get in front of these things, have a plan, and be prepared, we're not caught on our back foot. And, some kind of action in the right direction is better than inaction every day of the week.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things that people are pretty concerned about right now after the Uvalde shooting. A lot of people have seen the news footage of the law enforcement officers just kind of standing around while this guy is shooting kids. And it's obviously, it is sensationalized to a degree, because it's like the way that they portray it is these guys are standing outside doing nothing while kids are being blown away inside of this building, as if these guys have this malicious intent to not do something. I mean, I think there was an attempt to vilify the law enforcement officers there for a while. But I think a lot of people saw that and they're concerned. It's like, is that what's going to happen in Kootenai County? I mean, if we have a school shooting, I mean, are we going to have law enforcement officers just standing around while the kids are being shot? Is that, I mean, I know that's a hard question, but is that what we have? Do we need to be worried about that?
I'm not going to get into too much about what they did. I think that it's still a little early.
Right.
I have read the initial report that was done by Alert, which is the national model. It's what the FBI uses. It's what we use. It's what is a requirement for all law enforcement in the state of Idaho and the federal system to go through. And Alert's own study says that they didn't follow any of the policies of Alert, which is kind of crazy because Alert comes from Texas. It's actually from Texas University. It's the national model. We do not condone or teach sitting around. Probably the biggest lesson learned was Columbine for that. At the time, we're talking, mid-90s, the national model was lock it down, call for SWAT. We don't do that anymore. Our SWAT team doesn't even do that anymore. We teach individual officer response and incident command. So if I'm the first person there, unless legitimately my cover is 3 steps behind me, I'm going and I control that scene. There's no calling for supervisors. There's no permission granted. There's no any of that. We teach our guys, if you're one, you go. If you can grab 2, 3 guys, you guys all arrive at the same time, by all means, we want to be in that group, but we are not going to wait, because the model that we follow for Alert is you have to stop the killing before you can stop the dying.
Yeah.
Right. Now, you're an Alert instructor.
I am. I am in a couple of different of their fields.
Okay. Are we prepared in Kootenai County? Have enough schools, businesses, organizations taken the training for you to feel comfortable that we are?
We're moving in the right. We're moving in the right direction.
Okay.
3 years ago, we had a huge insurgence of people wanting this curriculum. Just this year, I've probably had 30 businesses, groups, and schools call me to say, hey, we need this again.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It is. Unfortunately, though, we had some lull for a couple years, so we're trying to catch up.
Mm-hmm.
And
mainly because of COVID, probably, right?
That's part of it, but also, unfortunately, when these events aren't in their face, they forget about them.
Yeah.
And we just had a couple of recent ones, and now it's on everybody's mind again.
Yeah. So of those 30, what percentage have you been able to get to?
I think that I've given 9 classes this year
so
already.
about a third of them already.
Yeah, and we've already set up some appointments. It's a myriad of sources. Mm-hmm. It's civic groups. It's like school transportation groups. It's churches. I've been going into lots of businesses, especially in the medical field, that would be commonly forgotten about, but they're seeking that. What I've really tried to do, though, is create a class that starts a dialogue instead of just doing a 4.5 hour class that's just about active shooter. I try to do a shorter class and touch on the key points of that, and always give them the opportunity to bring me back in for additional training, but also touch on workplace violence issues, basic safety and security, stuff like trespassing and unwanted people at your business or your location, just to give a more brief or a more, I guess, well-rounded view of kind of all of the things we're talking about, because avoiding one of these incidents is better than how to deal with it when you're already in the thick.
I noticed on the slide set that a lot of it had to do with recognizing those threats.
Yeah, absolutely.
As they approach.
You know, we, in our never-ending quest for political correctness and kind-heartedness, we have basically stopped paying attention to, we call it our lizard brain, but our spidey senses, the stuff that gives you goosebumps, makes you know, if it doesn't feel right, it's not. This is Idaho. We have every right and ability to tell somebody, you know what, I don't want you on my property.
I just don't like you. I need you to leave. Yeah, it's fair.
You could avoid an
Chris
awful
doesn't
lot
come
of
to my
stuff.
house anymore because of that.
Yeah. That's the reason why. I thought it was something else.
Okay, you can come.
So the class, how do you get set up for this class? Because it would be great if we could use this podcast to kind of promote this idea of getting into this class. So is there a link on the Sheriff's Department website, or
for the classes that we're getting ready to teach in the month of August? There's not yet, but there will be. And it's not it's not that structured. It's not going to be a sign up or you don't get to show. We're not going to limit it. We're finding venues that are big enough to hold, 40, 60, 80 people at a time. That way we can get as much as we can out there. As far as, if you're a civic group, a church, a business that wants a class, contact the Sheriff's Office. They'll forward it to me. Okay. And we will do the best we can to accommodate it. As we already alluded to, though, the list is starting to get pretty long. I'm incorporating some other instructors into it. We have a cadre of instructors for this stuff that's great. And I'm bringing a lot of new talent in to try to get them doing those as well. Unfortunately, like everybody else, if you think it's, you see the help wanted sign on every business in town, the sheriff's office is doing the same thing. So sometimes it might be a little extended. So I would encourage a group that's interested in one of these classes, as soon as those hit the Facebook page or the website and the press release, get a couple of people together and go to one of these classes to at least get that taste, and then figure out, hey, you know what, we're gonna do this for in-service training in December or in November or whatever it is, and see if we can get me out there for a couple hours to hit.
Would you like to give out your personal cell number so that
well, how about we put a link to the Sheriff's Department in the comments below?
We'll do that.
And then
are those going to go out in the Alert Kootenai notifications? Because we have a link in there.
Because they're actually Alert Kootenai is specific to emergency stuff only. That's actually kind of part of the way we're able to use that system, is it's only for emergencies.
Right.
There's a link for that. Will be in the description.
Yeah. Now let's shift gears a little bit because we're running short on time. But we had not too long ago, we had a local pastor that was attacked by a gentleman in the parking lot of his church. He was shot several times. Thank God he survived. He's a good friend of mine. But that was really kind of like, it woke a lot of churches up to the fact that there are people out there that just desire to hurt people.
Absolutely.
Are you aware of any other instances where something similar like that has happened in our area or nearby?
So that specific event, no, where the pastor was sought out, but where violence has occurred at churches, several. We have had several law enforcement involved shootings at places of worship. Typically they're in the parking lots. They haven't been inside the buildings. We had one this year. We had one either last year or the year before. There's been several in my career, and a lot of times they're occurring in the parking lot.
This is in Kootenai County.
In Kootenai County.
Yeah, that's you just don't hear about those things, and it's like,
well, for what it's worth, sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad, but typically our news is shadowed by Spokane's.
Yeah.
But they were well documented and well known at the time. Unfortunately, we sometimes forget. But these events are occurring at places of worship within our community.
So what have we learned in these cases?
Well, as law enforcement, we're always trying to figure out how to better respond, to be more efficient. In a lot of these cases, we're after the fact, we're getting those layouts of the buildings and codes to get in, emergency access type stuff. Also figuring out what resources these churches already have in place so we can work with them. The public, I think, has actually learned the most. And, you know, the old adage of not in my neighborhood or we don't have those problems. If you still have that thought in your mind in this community, guys, our community is changing.
Yeah.
The violent crime is up through the roof. And the first 3 months of this year were the bloodiest and most violent of my 16 years.
Whoa.
Wow.
Without question. The number of officer-involved shootings and SWAT calls that we're having, back in the old days, there was one SWAT call a year up until, maybe even as far back as 2 to 3 years ago, 6 or 8 a year. I think we've already had like 11 this year. And these aren't like a pre-planned search warrant. These are in-progress SWAT calls. Barricaded subjects, shots fired, arsons, people being attacked. I mean, it is, our community has changed.
What in the world's going on, Nick? I mean, what happened? Is it just the influx of people from other states? Because I think that's what people will automatically do. They'll automatically blame the Californians.
They love to do that. And the fact is, most of these are being committed by people who have lived here for their whole lives, or at least a good portion of them. They're rare is the case where somebody has moved into the area and decided they're going to bring evil with them.
Yeah, right.
So it's not gang overflow from Spokane.
Oh, there's always a little of that.
A little of that?
Oh, yeah, sure. We have gang activity. If you walk into our jail today and go look in the board, there's probably between 9 and 13 gangs represented for people we have in custody.
That's bonkers.
That's been that way, though, for
a long time.
15 years.
Yeah. Are they motivated by like passion, like crimes of the moment? Are they political in nature? Is it just like is it drug related? Is it a fair mixture of all of those? Or
I'm going to say it's a combination. I would say the biggest thing it's going to boil down to is going to be mental health issues. And you can contribute most of the substance abuse problems, which ends up being drugs and drug violence and dealing and all of that stuff. They're fueling people who are trying to self-medicate.
Yeah.
You're going to be dealing with that. You're going to be dealing with all of these other things. But the breakdown of mental health in our society has really exploded our community. The violence that we're seeing, I wish I had the answer, because if I had the answer, then we'd probably be able to find a solution.
Yeah.
But I don't have the answer. I cannot explain why in this day and age we're seeing the level of violence that we are.
Yeah, it's terrifying. The mental health issues particularly are just massive. So the question arises then, with all the things that we have learned and with all the things, the increase in violence, I know a lot of pastors now that are they're arming themselves. A lot of churches are arming themselves, trying to be a little bit more prepared. Do you view this as a help for law enforcement, or is it a hindrance, or is it just depend on the situation?
Well, I think it's always going to be on the plus side. But there's caveats to that, and I'm not trying to sound too reserved there. If you just willy-nilly say, hey, we're going to arm everybody and we're going to, we'll take care of it ourselves, that's, in my opinion, not much different than saying we're not going to do anything and just hope for the best.
Yeah.
There's so many things that people forget that go into that. One of the biggest ones, having policies and procedures for having armed security, say, at a church.
Yeah.
Because you don't want somebody to misrepresent your parishioner.
Yeah.
There's a lot of issues that come with that. You also need them to be educated, not just in how to pull the trigger, but when to pull the trigger.
Yeah.
they need to understand Idaho law and use of force and all of those other things if you're going to have something organized. What we see is groups, let's say church groups, decide, you know what, the world's changing, we want a armed security team. And they almost always go to, okay, well, who's interested? And then from there, they'll vet them a little bit. Well, we have a bunch of former military guys. Well, I'm not saying they're not great at running a gun. However, I don't know how much they understand about Idaho law or use of force.
Yeah, and there's a lot to consider there, not only criminal but civil as well.
Tremendous amounts of civil liabilities. But there needs to be a plan in place for the aftermath as well. If one of these events takes place and you have armed security either subdue or have to deal with the aftermath, they're going to need some help as well. There's going to be legal defense. There's going to be psychological and spiritual stuff that's going to have to follow that. There's a lot to this that, that's why cops make all that big money, because they have to fill all of those roles and take on all of those responsibilities and obligations.
There's a lot of organizations out there that if you join them, they pretty much guarantee that if you are in an altercation, that they will pick up the pieces, so to speak.
Well, they can say whatever they want.
Okay,
you can also hire an attorney to tell you exactly what you want to hear.
Mm-hmm.
But what it looks, where the rubber meets the road, what that looks like, that's a scary place to be. And, somebody saying, hey, we'll take care of everything. Well, that's if you did it all right and it was textbook and it's on video and the bad guy admits it and otherwise there's an uphill battle.
Yeah.
You just, I'm not going to get into whether I agree or disagree with it, but pretty much everybody remembers Zimmerman and Trayvon Martin. His legal defense was like $2.3 million. I don't even, they purposely don't give me that much space on my checks to write that many zeros.
Right.
Without having policies and procedures and plans in place, you're setting yourself and your church up for some uphill battles.
We've discovered that through.
You've got to have that legal portion covered.
Yeah, just through our nursery.
Absolutely.
We've got policies and procedures for that. They're children. Especially.
Listen, the bad men coming to do evil want easy targets.
Yeah. Churches are among the easiest.
Not in this region, but in other places, absolutely. However, you need to have a whole. It's not just a hey, we're going to arm everybody. There needs to be some real. Because as bad as it would be if an attacker came and attacked a church, what if somebody left a firearm unsecured and a child shot another child with it?
Yeah.
Or somebody wasn't carrying securely and dropped a firearm and it went off during prayer.
Yeah.
Those are real things that happen.
Yeah.
And
we have had instances here where our safety team has gone into the bathroom and found a firearm that someone had removed because they were going to use the bathroom.
Yeah.
And just left it. We've had that scenario take place here at our church.
Sure.
And so our safety team is always, going in after people to look at, so you're right. There's so much to consider policy wise, and so, each church has to decide, but it kind of has to have a genesis point. And I don't think a lot of pastors and a lot of churches are actually thinking in the direction of, well, we need to call Nick Franssen and have him Franssen and have him come in and teach us, 1, 2, 3, these are kind of the things that we need to be thinking about. Or like coordinating with the sheriff's department for blueprints, or, that didn't even occur to me. Like I'm sitting here, I'm the senior pastor of Athol Baptist Church. It never even occurred to me to call up the sheriff's department and say, hey, here's a copy of our blueprints in case you guys need them.
Yeah.
The
fire department has a key.
Or know that we have security
knows
cameras all over the place that you can look into closed rooms.
You would be amazed how many crimes we now solve because a church had a security camera or you had a Ring doorbell camera.
Right.
And we're able to solve a tremendous amount of stuff. But you know what? That's why it's so important to really follow that community policing model and be involved in all aspects of law enforcement within the community. And the sheriff's office, I'm blessed to work there because we truly strive for that. Get to know your local cop. Share what you have for resources, but also what you have for needs.
Yeah.
Because if you guys need something, any group needs something, and we don't know, we're going to miss that need every single time.
Yeah. So your local officer for your district is the point of contact for that, or is it just call the sheriff's department?
Well, it's really going to depend on where you're at and what the situation is. In a lot of cases, these smaller communities on the outskirts of the county, you're probably going to have a guy or two guys that are predominantly responsible for that area that will be able to help you out and respond and have those discussions. Sometimes it may just be the cop that you see, at the coffee shop or around town, and you wave him down in a parking lot and say, hey, I'd like to introduce myself. And do you normally work this area, or is there anything I need to know? Have those discussions because they're invaluable for us and for you. We are always trying to find ways to be there and to earn that trust,
Right.
keep that trust. But, as citizens, we don't know what we don't know. And if you're not letting us know, the sheriff's office has done more town hall meetings and community meetings this year than what we had done in probably the last 3 or 4 combined. And they've been wildly successful.
Right.
I mean, we filled fire stations and buildings with people who just wanted to see a name with a face and hear what's happening in their community. There's not a lot of people in your local law enforcement, whether you're in a city or in the county, that are going to be able to tell you what's really going on. Sometimes you won't like what you hear, though.
Yeah.
You ask about drugs and we say, hey, we had 3 overdoses this week. You didn't hear about them, but they're happening.
Yeah. It seems to me like there's some large conversations that need to be had between different types of services. We were talking about the mental health issue not too long ago, and there's just this huge disconnect between professional kind of social worker, kind of like mental health workers, and Christian kind of church-related kind of social workers and law enforcement and mental health professionals. It's like there's just this disconnect between those things, and it doesn't seem like there's any way of like trying to bring those things together as a resource. And it's frustrating from my perspective as a pastor of like 25 years. I have watched the mental health of our nation decline, and the spiritual well-being of our nation decline, and the morality of our nation decline. And I'd reach out to like mental health professionals, say, hey, look, I got this guy, he's like suffering from, perhaps suffering from this, and this, and really like to refer him to, there's no one to refer him to.
Well, there are, a lot of times it's a waiting list. A lot of times it depends on what you have for resources, whether it's going to be private pay or if you're on, some sort of government assistance program. Believe it or not, private pay is usually the hardest to actually get in with somebody, or insurance. But what we as a society have forgotten about the spiritual elements in a lot of ways. It's mind, body, and soul. And I think that a lot of people could get what they're looking for from incorporating all 3 of those instead of just 2 of the 3 or
Right,
one of the
right.
3. There's no magic pill that's going to make you better, but being a little healthier, working on your mental health issues, and keeping yourself spiritually strong, all 3 of those together make you a pretty good person.
Yeah.
We forgot about that.
Yeah, we did. So last question.
Yeah.
I'm a pastor of a small church, and I feel like I've got a security issue, and I want to get a safety team started, and I want to make sure that I'm coordinating with my sheriff's department in the best way that I could possibly coordinate with them. Who's the first person I call to get that started?
So believe it or not, it won't be me. If I was a church that was thinking about, you know what, it's time to move in this direction, society and the world's changed, we need to go that way. I'm going to start those connections with other churches that have successful programs. You're going to learn more from them than you can from me.
How would you know they have a successful program?
Ask them.
Ask them?
Yeah. Having those discussions at that level is super powerful, because we're all in it together, and you guys are all in it together. You might be reaching a slightly different market, but building those relationships is huge. Asking another pastor or priest or whomever, hey, do you guys have a security program in place? Is it armed? Has it been successful? What do you think? Can we see your policies? How did it start and where is it now? Learn as much as you can, because they have gone through the most specific stuff to what you're trying to accomplish. They'll be able to answer questions that I didn't even know were questions. After you look at a couple different varieties of those and say, well, we like this, we like that, we don't want to do this, and you kind of piece it together, by all means, reach out to me at the sheriff's office and then say, hey, we're putting this together. Do you have any ideas? I'll have that conversation with you. And then when you get to a point where you're like, okay, we picked the team, we've decided these are the policies and procedures, we'd like a little bit of training, we can put on a CRACE class, which is the citizen response to an active shooter event, or some of those other types of things, and have that discussion, more formalized training. The sheriff's office can't give you resources as far as classes that you can pay to take. That's not our role. We don't play favorites like that, but you start talking to some other people in the industry, some other churches and stuff. Several of them have sought outside private training, and some of it I'm sure has been fabulous, and some of it they will tell you they wouldn't do again. So figure out, what's going to fit your desires and your budget, and go from there.
Yeah. So is there a place would we call you to make sure that we've given you guys everything that you need to best coordinate with you guys, like blueprints or like access to our cameras, or like ability to get into the building quickly? You can
just contact the sheriff's office.
Just contact the sheriff's office.
Absolutely. Athol, the Athol area, the Worley area, and the Harrison area are going to probably have specialized deputies that are responsible for that area. If they do at the time, reach out to them, find out, hey, do we have a district guy working in this area today? And they can take that information, make sure it gets put in the computer system. It's confidential information. It's for law enforcement purposes only, but those are invaluable resources. So we can put a note in your name file, the file that we build for each location or address, that says lockbox is here. Put a attachment in there that has a map of the plans, have emergency contacts in there, put notes in there that say surveillance around the entire inside and outside of the building or whatever, and this is the person who you contact for access to that. Those are great resources for us in the field.
Okay. All right.
You got your marching orders, Ken.
Yeah. Better get busy. Well, Nick, man, thank you so much for being with us, man.
Absolutely.
We really appreciate your time. Awesome. And we're going to have you back on the Liberty Rumble. We're going to talk a little bit more about philosophies of different types of scenarios, and a little bit more of a broader discussion. But being a representative of the sheriff's department and being here with us today, man, that says a lot to people. And so hopefully this podcast will kind of shed some light on at least the sheriff's department's desire to be supportive of our community. And that's a big deal, I think. I think that we need to understand how great our law enforcement here in our community is, and support you guys.
Amen.
So
thank you for that. We truly are blessed to serve this community. I truly believe there is no place better in the world to put a badge and a gun on and be able to serve. So thank you guys for your time, and I look forward to seeing you again.
Awesome. Thanks, man. Well, that about does it for us today.
Wait. Aren't you going to say, Greg, do you have anything else? Ken, do you have anything else? Put on your radio voice and do that.
You know, this guy's got his time is important, Greg.
It's important to me.
All right. Well, hold on.
questions.
Greg has something to say, obviously.
Well, just a couple of quick things. One of your slides, 98% of shooters shoot alone.
Yes. One of the big takeaways, we always plan and treat them like there's multiple
That's
suspects.
Kind of,
Where there's one, there's three. But the statistics just don't lie.
right.
And that's where armed citizens or school resource officers are so effective, because if you can stop the one bad guy, the chances are there's no others.
Good.
Now, we will still always treat it like it's the real thing, like there's a whole bunch of them. But in order to stop the killing, typically there's one attacker. So we go direct to threat, and we find that person and neutralize them.
Okay, good. Real quick, our legal people that we use, some of our resources, they have suggested that we use safety team versus security team. Does the sheriff's department have any say on that, why that would be that way?
No, I'm sure that there is some sort
Yeah, well, there's
of
legal stuff that we're dealing with.
civil and all that. That's like changing the name of what a janitor is to a technician.
Custodial technician. Yeah.
Sanitary
But
engineer.
it does sound better. You know, a lot of places, their safety team is going to respond to emergencies inside the thing. They don't want to be called security because, quite honestly, most places should be calling the sheriff's office if you have an unwanted person in the parking lot, not sending your parishioners or your citizens out there.
911 is the first line of defense.
Yeah, we still do that. That's our job, and I encourage you to use us anytime that you can.
Okay. Yeah. Your phone is your most powerful weapon these days.
Absolutely.
For sure. Yeah. I usually ask the guys if they have any final thoughts, so that's my fault. I just forgot all about it. I'm totally like, I don't know what happened.
I was saving it, man.
But like during the Liberty Rumble, we recorded that earlier, and it's like I'm channeling Biden now. I just can't get my head straight for some reason. I don't know
like,
what's going on.
ignore your constituents. Is that what you're
Wow. Mental illness indeed.
I know, right? Did you have any final thoughts, Ken?
Hey, man, I just want you to know I'm glad and proud to know that Kootenai County is as well prepared and supportive as you guys are.
Yeah, for sure.
I live just across the county line in Bonner, but I'm assuming it's a very similar situation up there and that you guys, cooperate together. But
Yeah, our counties actually have a great relationship. Our sheriff and Sheriff Wheeler are very, very close, and most of Bonner counties, especially their new guys, go through the academy equivalency out of NIC that I teach. They're going through the same stuff. So,
sweet.
And if there was an incident, whether in Kootenai or Bonner or Shoshone or Benoit, we all go until we don't have to anymore.
Right.
So
right.
Sweet.
That is the way that we do business, and that's the way that we will always do business.
That's awesome.
Cool.
Did you have any final thoughts, Nick?
No, I just thank you guys for the opportunity. For anybody that's looking for any kind of resources that are out there, just to learn more about this, and there's a couple of videos, Run, Hide, Fight. It's on YouTube. Mm-hmm. It's a fabulous resource of kind of the basics that we teach. Same with Avoid, Deny, and Defend. There's videos on that. That one comes out of Austin, Texas. Same principles that we teach. You can always jump onto Alert's website and look at some of those materials. One thing that recently happened, we were talking about the Save a Life instead of just taking one. Kootenai Health is starting up a bunch of Stop the Bleed classes again as a community resource.
Nice.
So since it's post-COVID, and always be learning. Look for something new.
Yeah. Train.
Yep, absolutely.
You'll always fall to the level of your training.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
Yep,
Thank you guys so much for the opportunity. I appreciate you.
No, we appreciate you being here, man. It really is a big deal, and we want our community, the people that we reach, to understand that, there's conversations being had, and
Absolutely.
our community is working to try and keep everyone as safe and as well maintained as we possibly can.
Yeah, we're going to up our game as a result of this, I'm sure.
For sure. All right, well, that officially actually does do it for us today. As always, thank you for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode, please give it a like and share it with your friends. Subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. You can find us on Apple, Google, Spotify. Your support really helps us to get our message of biblical philosophy out to more people. It also helps us to attract higher profile guests. Thank you, Ken, Greg, and Gavin, for helping produce this episode. Thank you, Nick, for being with us. Really appreciate it. Thanks to Athol Baptist Church and its members for their generous support of this ministry. And again, thank you for listening. And until next time, remember, be brave, be bold, be loud. You can be a force for biblical morality in your world. Don't wait. Don't be silent. And for heaven's sake, don't give up. With that, we are out.